Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jack Slack here. It is 9:40 on Monday morning in England, and I'm fresh back from my road work and my shower, so I'm a little bit wet. It is also raining because it's miserable here. But this podcast has invigorated me. I now get down to work a lot earlier with these sort of things in the morning. So I'm feeling pretty good. Got my big mug of tea. Got an iced coffee just in case. One of those shitty ones you buy from Tesco. And we're going to talk about the fights. Yeah! Going to do a ton of listener mail this week because I got a ton of listener mail this week. I think I got about 70, 80 questions, which is astonishing. So thank you all so much for that, because it's one of the funnest parts of the show for me, interacting with you guys, answering questions. You know, I'm not any kind of guru in any regard, but it's nice to be asked for your opinion. So if you don't get answered this morning, I will try and do an extra one midweek, I think. I've got this history episode coming out too. Last week, I told you my voice was shredded. It only got worse. I spent a whole day recording the history show, and about 10 minutes of it came out good. And then I went back and listened to about, half an hour of recording, and my voice was just obliterated. But I have sort of won it back this week. Lots of Lemsip, cough sweets, that bollocks. So extra questions in the week, maybe, if not next week. But I'll try and be putting them out. I might even just put out one question at a time, each day or something like that. I just want to try and keep answering your questions because it is so much fun. I can't stress to you how much I enjoy that. So please keep sending them, especially if you don't get it answered. Send it again, reword it, send a threat, whatever you want. So today we're going to start with the fights because I feel like mixing up the order, and they were actually pretty good. We'll go straight to the main event because Michael Johnson looked really good. We were talking about this last week. I didn't really get too far into details of game planning because, to be honest, I hadn't paid close attention to Johnson in a while. He had that disastrous fight with Nate Diaz, and he was on a 2-fight losing streak. I sort of fell for the this guy's not a contender anymore mentality. Dustin Poirier, obviously, I've been keeping up with because he's been starching people left, right, and centre. Good old-fashioned banger, Dustin Poirier. There's a great moment in the Joe Duffy fight, which was a really good fight, where he is opening Joe Duffy's face up with elbows from guard along the fence. You could hear him say, "You like that? That's bleeding." Just, it's an awesome guy nonetheless. There was also a really sweet moment where I think it was him. He said that he had a baby on the way, and he was sat next to Max Holloway at the press conference of one of the fights. They both had fights on the card, and obviously Max Holloway lost to him years and years ago. And after the question had concluded, Max Holloway just gives him a little fist bump and like, "Well done," which was quite sweet. It's nice to see those human moments, especially between former opponents, because a lot of this sport is theatre. Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz don't hate each other. No matter how much they tell you that and how much you believe it, they don't. They love each other. They're making tons of money each time they get in the cage. It's just theatre, and some people take it far too seriously. Or maybe some people are even deeper into the joke than we are. Maybe the massive McGregor fan who dresses like him and has buffed up a bit, actually, maybe that guy is so deep into the joke that he thinks we're idiots for not getting it. But anyway, Poirier versus Johnson. I was talking about low kicks being an important factor last week because I know that Michael Johnson has great low kicks, prides himself on them, uses them very dexterously, doesn't always load up for days on them, which is what you see a lot of in MMA. Guys who can't really use them effectively because they can kick very hard, but they take so long to do it. Inside low kick I was talking about because both men southpaws. Poirier loves to square up and throw his left hand. That's his power hand. He was doubling up on it against Bobby Green. And I thought if you start punting that, you've got a good chance of knocking his leg out each time he steps in. So I thought that would be a good idea for Johnson to try and have Poirier fighting like he was on an ice rink, try and kick that leg out every time he steps in. Poirier looked very uncomfortable and he started stepping in really deep and committing his weight to his punches. And that's when that counter right hook really started landing. He landed it like once, and then the second time he landed it, that was it. And again, it was that closing the door thing. Dustin Poirier squared up to throw his left straight. Southpaws again, remember we're talking about southpaws. Squared up to throw his left straight, and Johnson beat him to the right hook. When you're talking about closing the door, every time you throw your rear hand, it's your power hand. And there are trade-offs with that. You have to square up to throw it, which means you are far more vulnerable to attacks. I was, if you really want to see this hammered home, watch the CM Punk training footage up to his fight. But if you watch the lead up to that, the reality shows, and you're not just looking at AJ Lee like I was, every time he jabbed, he looked quite good, because you don't have to open up to jab. You're behind your lead shoulder, you're bladed, you're pretty safe. You're basically stiff arming. You watch a lot of guys stiff arm on the shoulder or over the shoulder, as Hazlitt liked, which is called the leverage guard. But the jab keeps you behind that shoulder, keeps you like a turtle in its shell. It's when you throw the right hand that you square up. You're vulnerable to attacks from the side, you're vulnerable to attacks over your right shoulder, and as you return to your fighting position, if you don't do it snappily with a nice left hook or a jab, you're vulnerable on your lead side too, over the lead shoulder. So Johnson caught him with a beautiful right hook, and Poirier didn't just stop. It wasn't throw the right hand out and try and recover very slowly like Andrei Arlovski does. He wasn't reeling his hand back. He threw his left hand and then he tried to throw like a winding lead uppercut. Lead uppercuts, we talk about this quite a lot. We talked about it a few weeks ago because Golovkin and Chocolatito are awesome with lead uppercuts. They're very difficult weapons to use at long distance. I mean, aside from Roy Jones, not a great long weapon. Dempsey famously believed that the only time to use the lead uppercut was with the feet level, so when you're infighting, basically. It opens you up a lot. Uppercuts in general open you up a lot, because there is no way to throw an uppercut without bringing your hand below the opponent's head anyway, which obviously exposes a massive hole in your guard. Unless, of course, you're on the inside and you're getting down low with your legs and trying to come up from underneath. But obviously very hard to do that at long range. Michael Johnson starched Dustin Poirier. Very impressive performance. He's now calling for money fights, as everyone does after they get a single win. But, I'm glad. I'm glad that fighters are doing that. Because I was learning all about veteran contracts in the NBA this week, and I was just astonished. It really hammers home that other sports players have got their shit together. Whereas you have guys like Nate Diaz who are making, 20 and 20? 20 grand show, 20 grand win, after years and years of being a decent attraction for the UFC. But that's getting on to money issues. Let's not do that. Right, Uriah Hall. This is an interesting one because this morning I went on Reddit and someone had put up a gif of this knockout loss and the Weidman knockout loss, saying, "Ooh, similar." And he was right. It was, but the comments were full of, "Oh yeah, well, 11 years apart," and it seemed to be people defending Uriah Hall's honor as though the guy was saying, "Oh look, shoddy chin, shoddy chin." The guy was saying that they were quite similar because Uriah Hall always, and I've been writing about this for years, he always circles off the fence with his hands low. And this is a habit from his style of sparring, his style of fighting. He throws punches, kicks, whatever, and then as soon as he feels like he's out of range, he drops his hands. Problem is, if the guy stays on him and he's right by the fence, he doesn't get out of range, but he still drops his hands. It's a muscle memory or whatever. And if you can keep him near the fence, is one that really costs him. So Brunson backs. Firstly, he comes out. Hall comes out and goes on the aggressive, and he stepped in as if he was going to look for like a flying knee or something. And Brunson, being the wrestler, just ducked in on his hips. And that's the danger you face as a striker if you're going on offensive. That's why guys like Anderson Silva and Lyoto Machida were a breath of fresh air in the sport, because in Pride, strikers had to go forward, try and hit you as hard as they could while you were on the feet before you shot on their hips, and then they had to try and sprawl on you really hard. It was the ring that also helps that, because you've got corners, you have to force action, or you can force action more easily. Whereas Anderson Silva, Lyoto Machida, those sort of guys found that in the big open cage with barely any corners, you can backtrack for days and invite the guy onto you without putting yourself in danger of running straight over the top of him for one of those reactionary takedowns. Anyway, so Hall gets locked up along the fence. They break. Brunson feints him back towards the fence again and fakes a long left overhand because he's a southpaw. Hall begins circling to his right, towards Brunson's left, that is, and with his hands low. And then he tries to throw a punch while he's doing it, which is really not ordinary to try and punch while you're circling out, because you're in a very bad position. And if you watch even guys like Willie Pep, when they're along the ropes, they are anticipating a punch coming back. They're moving towards whichever side they want to go, or they're faking and going back the other way, but they always know that there's a good chance that the punch is going to come and try and meet them. So they've got hands up high, and they're going to duck underneath whatever comes at them. They don't try and punch back typically while they're moving off. So he gets clipped with the left hook again and sent to the mat. It was a questionable stoppage. I don't think I touched on this in my article because I was just sort of banging it out, thinking about all the cool technical stuff that was going on, but I don't think it was a very good stoppage. It didn't look like he got hit a lot on the ground. Obviously, Herb Dean's a bit closer. He can see if the guy's eyes are rolling back and stuff like that. But Brunson didn't really land much on the ground. But Brunson is looking great. I thought that was a really good performance. Not a very long performance, but he immediately took advantage of a big flaw in Hall's game, which has been there for years. You could even see it in bouts with guys like Kelvin Gastelum. In the very brief moments that he was circling along the fence against Gastelum, he'd get clipped with punches and then put back on the fence. And Gastelum was considerably shorter and not very polished on the feet at the time. So people have been sending me questions like, is it time to say that Uriah Hall's not very good or not that good? No, it's never time to say that. I mean, he's got tons of talent. He just seems like a fighter who is built for beasting everyone in the sparring sessions. If you go tit for tat with him, if you go, okay, I'm going to do some stuff, now you do some stuff, he's going to beat you every time. It's when you say, okay, you've done your thing, now I'm going to stay on you, move you to the fence, and take advantage of those openings. It was true in the Whittaker fight too. I wrote an article about this week. He'll throw stuff and then he'll just turn his back, like we're going to disengage now and then it's your turn. And when he did that to Whittaker, every single time Whittaker would get on his back and push him to the fence. And he was dropping like a minute of, I hate the term cage control, but a minute of a dominant position for Whittaker by doing a second of striking. He's a brilliant athlete and technician on the feet. He just makes some very bad strategic decisions or tactical decisions. You can work out what I mean. So what else was there on that card? Leleco, he was hilarious. Whatever that guy's name was, the Brazilian. Just the ugliest fighting style I've ever seen on the feet. And it was a nice reminder that you can't. This is mixed martial arts. You can get to the UFC with atrocious striking or atrocious grappling. Someone brought this up this week. They said people complain about Damian Maia being one-dimensional, but they're the same people who love watching the guys who can knock a guy out easily on the feet, but are just helpless when they get taken down. Yeah, it's mixed martial arts. If you get into the UFC, you can do it on one skill or two skills. You know, you don't have to be a complete fighter to get onto the UFC, even the main card, to be honest. But Leleco was doing this thing where he was like throwing a long palm down hook to the body with his face way out in front of him. He's just getting punched in the face as a response. And then he stepped in for a left hand, stepped on the guy's foot, and I was thinking, oh, is this guy craftier than I thought? And then he obviously wasn't expecting it because he slid halfway across the octagon like he'd trod on a banana skin. Yeah, not going to laugh at that guy too much because obviously he's a decent fighter. He's there in the UFC. But just really herky-jerky style. It reminded me of the heyday of the Dean of Mean, Keith Jardine. Benitez was good. Gabriel Benitez. He was fighting Sam Cecilia. He was using the very, very low kicks, the low kicks as I like to call them, into the shin and the calf. Those can really hurt. And the other neat thing about them, if you're kicking the inside of the thigh, just above the knee, nice and tender, the opponent can pick their leg up a little bit, and you're kicking into the knee or the top of the shin, the really hard bits that hurt. Whereas if you're kicking very low, as soon as the opponent picks that leg up, you're kicking maybe the ankle, maybe the foot, maybe you're just missing altogether. It's if you're particularly concerned about getting your kicks checked because you kick very hard, for instance, that's a great one for you. If you're worried about the leg getting grabbed, also a great one for you. Anderson Silva in that dreadful fight with Damian Maia, where he was absolutely terrified of committing to anything serious. He threw hundreds of those very low kicks because if you're going below the knee, it's very hard for the opponent to pick them up. If you're kicking the thigh, the opponent only needs to bend their knee into it, and your leg will ride up straight into their hands, and you're getting taken down. Threw some nice round kicks to the body, and then he came in with this blisteringly fast double jab into the left straight, which went straight down the middle of Cecilia's guard. Cecilia fell to the ground, was very much conscious. Benitez ran in. Cecilia grabs the head on the outside single, and the head outside single is, of course, always in danger of the crucifix and those elbows. And Benitez went full Gary Goodridge. He got the crucifix, landed some elbows. Cecilia started to sort of scramble out, pushed him away, back to the feet. A couple more kicks. Cecilia shoots a takedown with his head down, which is always a sign that the guy's doing it out of sort of panic and wanting to buy some time. Head down takedowns, always in danger of the guillotine. Slaps on the guillotine, rolls the high elbow over the shoulder, the Marcellitine. Probably the most easily learnable, powerful guillotine. If you start working on that, you can get a beastly guillotine fairly quickly. Because it ruins the opponent's counters. And even on your back, if you get that position and the opponent runs round your guard, you can still choke them from there, and while you're working to get your knee back in. It's a very, very powerful choke, and it's very limiting on the opponent's upper body movement, because your forearm is bracing on the back of their shoulder. So neat performance out of Benitez, liked him. Chaz Skelly came out and found a submission in absolute chaos against Maximo Blanco. Poor old Maximo Blanco, he was a huge thing in Japan, and he just can't catch a break in the States. Yeah, they came out, both of them decided to throw jumping kicks at each other. One of you's going to fall over, or both. And they fell to the mat. Skelly goes for a guillotine. Arm in, doesn't look like he has it. And then, as they're rolling around, he sees the opportunity to squeeze the elbow in across Blanco and go for the anaconda choke. It was a remarkable alertness within just a completely chaotic scramble. Gets the anaconda choke, chokes him out. It was brilliant, and it took seconds. So Chaz Skelly, big feather in his cap there. I think he got the bonus for it too, the performance of the night bonus or whatever it is. I don't really keep an eye on those, but he definitely deserved one. But then so did Brunson. I don't think he got one. So, it's rough only having those two performance of the night bonuses. But a good night of fights overall, I thought. The very fast knockouts in the main and co-main, obviously great for post-fight stuff and excitement. But a night of quick finishes. You want quick finishes, but you don't want them so quick that people don't get into the fight. It's the weird middle ground of fight sports. But anyway, I can't complain. I watched all the fights and I quite enjoyed them, which can be a rarity on these sort of thrown together fight night cards. Next weekend I don't have high hopes for. Anyway, let's do some listener mail. Hi Jack. Huge fan. I was wondering if you ever feel bad for watching a sport where people get seriously hurt or even might die. Sometimes I think of it. I also have a hard time explaining to my friends why it should be legal if they don't watch it. Best regards, Marcus. Yes, sometimes it is uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable thing. But fighting is a part of the human experience. To me, it remains the most beautiful sport in the world. Because it's all fair game. It's one-on-one, and it's one of the sports where you can win by outsmarting the other guy. You could call it cheese tactics, you could call it a special play, or whatever you want, but there have been great fighters tricked into losses by much, much worse fighters. However, a large part of the sport, in fact, one of the more interesting things about combat sports is that injuries in the ring, by and large, aren't as bad as you would expect when two guys are throwing full power punches and kicks at each other. If you get two savvy veterans in there, a lot of the time they get into a more technical sort of grinding fight. Then you have the quick finishes, which are normally either a quick shift of momentum or a break in the lines, or they are one guy being significantly better than the other. And in mixed martial arts, quick endings are fairly good for fighters, because the 3 knockdown rule in boxing is a real dangerous one. Because you could be concussed by the first punch, and then you're getting hit in the head with a concussion. And you have to do that 2 more times before the referee will let you fall down and leave you alone. Mixed martial arts, you get knocked down once, the other guy's on top of you, you're probably getting TKO'd. Unless you are with it enough that you can get back to your guard, and there's a good chance if you're with it enough to do that, you haven't been as hurt as badly as you might be. In boxing, if you want to get a knockout quickly, you have to lay the dude out. In mixed martial arts, you only have to make him slip, basically. If you jump on top of him and just don't let him get back in the game at all. Add to that the numerous ways that a mixed martial arts fight can go. If a guy's getting beaten up on the feet in boxing, he can hang around forever just holding on. If you watch Joshua Clottey versus Manny Pacquiao, all he did was put on the earmuffs. And he didn't get marked up too badly. It wasn't like Margarito, who got really mashed his face up just because he was opening up and coming forward. Joshua Clottey managed to stay relatively unmarked, but that's still hundreds of punches bouncing off your head through your hands. The brain trauma and the shake is still there. If you watched that in MMA, you'd say he isn't intelligently defending himself. Covering up is not intelligently defending yourself. I can't count the number of boxing matches I've seen where the commentators and the people at the side of the ring and you at home are going, or ringside, depending if you're there or not, are going, they need to stop this now, because the guy is taking 4 out of every 5 punches, but the one he blocks is the one that the referee sees and goes, oh, well, he's defending himself, let's let him continue. There was quite a moving one the other day, Chris Eubank Jr. and Chris Eubank Sr. Climbed in to give his son advice in the corner towards the end of that fight, and he basically said, I don't know what this ref's doing, this lad's not defending himself, stop hitting him in the head, just focus on the body for the most part, don't throw the power shots upstairs. And you could see the same thing actually with Emmanuel Augustus. He had an opponent who, something very strange happened with him. He caught a nerve in his neck or something like that, and he started clutching the back of his head. And Emmanuel Augustus is as savvy as they come. He'd been in the ring and seen it all. And he exclusively worked that guy's body. He'd jab the body, he'd throw the 1-2 to the body. He didn't hit him in the head again until the referee stepped in and said, this guy's injured, there's something going wrong. So it's good to see the compassion from fighters. And in mixed martial arts, a fighter, if the fighter feels like his opponent is reeling and the referee's not stopping it and he's going to get himself seriously hurt, the fighter has the choice to dump the other guy on the mat. And if he's not with it, you can just slice through his guard like butter, get to mount. Add to that, giving the guy the way out, allowing him to quit. If you start falling down in boxing without much provocation, that's the end of your career. People are going to say that guy's chin's gone, or that guy's a coward, or that guy was paid to fall over. Mixed martial arts, you get the choice to say, shit, this has all gone tits up, and then tap out. If you watch the first George St. Pierre versus Matt Serra fight, obviously he got a lot of flack for tapping to strikes, but he wasn't going to get anywhere from, even if he fought his way back into that fight, he'd been beaten up for the first round. And that's a huge thing, giving a fighter a way out. But as I said, this is an astonishingly beautiful sport. And a lot of that beauty is inseparable from the brutality of it. It tells you a lot about yourself, and it tells you a lot about humanity, the human condition in general. Because if I saw a fight going on in the street, I would probably not want to look at it. I've seen a few people get kicked around in gutters and things like that. And you either want to jump in and help them, or you want to just get out of there as fast as possible. It makes you feel very uneasy. But I have never, even some of the worst beatings I've seen in professional sports, I've never wanted to turn away. I've always kept watching. There's always something. It's a strange attraction, and it might be something wrong with me. It might be something left over from, the primordial ooze. But something about me loves fighting. And I get paid to write for a living, and I'm struggling to justify it. So draw your own conclusions. It is hard to like this sport sometimes. On the subject of legality, though, I don't believe there's anything that says that mixed martial arts should be illegal. Obviously getting the smaller gloves through was quite a con. We managed to get that through. That was good. Because now boxing should be going back to those. Boxing used to be done in 5-ounce gloves. If you watch Jack Johnson or Jack Dempsey or anyone like that, 5-ounce gloves. And it makes the game so much more interesting. There's none of that Joshua Clottey style covering up. But if you're going to let 300-pound roided up monsters jump into each other head first with helmets on, week in and week out, even at high school and college, you can't tell a guy that he cannot sell his fighting skills for 20, 30 fights. That's the beautiful thing about prize fighting. You don't need to do a lot of it. You find out very quickly if you're going to be something, and then you get to negotiate your price. A lot of the time you're going to get ripped off, but occasionally there'll be a Conor McGregor. I would say that one of the best things about the the stigma attached to mixed martial arts is that it makes everyone involved very conscious that safety is key. As soon as there's a death in the UFC, there's going to be uproar. That will make it all over Facebook, all over Twitter. People who've never even watched a UFC event will jump in with their predetermined and unresearched views. So the UFC has always been very good about safety, in the Zuffa era at least, and working with athletic commissions and doing extra stuff when they're working with athletic commissions that clearly couldn't give a shit, like Texas. But there are now, there are smaller promotions, and even some that are getting bigger, that are playing fast and loose with the rules that we've got in place. And the thing is that if you do everything by the book and then there's a death, you can say that's unfortunate. If you skip off even one of those things and there's a death, that looks really, really bad. Because it draws attention to every other time that some rinky-tink little promotion in the middle of fucking nowhere has put in a 0-3 soccer mum with no training against their young prospect or whatever. Now, I said this the other week on Twitter. Someone asked me, would I do what Scott Coker is doing? And I said, yeah, I would. As a promoter, it's your job to make the money. And freak fights and working your way around commissions and drug tests does that. It's our job as fight fans who want this sport to continue, and the fight press, obviously, it's our job to call them out on that. And another thing about playing it by the book with the post-knockout care and all of that, I mean, it has taken us a long time to drop the post-fight interview with the knocked out man, which was the stupidest thing in professional mixed martial arts. But otherwise, post-knockout care has always been quite good in combat sports where it happens all the time. But I have seen numerous rugby games, soccer games, team games where a guy will get knocked out, and because it's not the norm, the doctor will just let them walk back onto the pitch. And that's the stuff that gives CTE specialists nightmares. Just got knocked out. Yep, send him back on. He can walk it off. So being kept to a higher standard really helps the fight game. And I think you should point that out to your friends. Ask them if they've ever seen someone knocked out in rugby or football. And then ask them how soon they were allowed back on. Because if you're doing fighting right, and you're respecting the commission suspensions and the drug testing and all of that, you are quite well looked after, or you are forced to look after yourself a lot better than a lot of the sports stars in other sports are. Hey Jack, been reading your articles for some time now and love the podcast. Keep up the great work. My question has to do with how you yourself analyse fights. Whenever I watch combat sports, I have a hard time trying to draw my own conclusions about the fight, because frankly some of the fighters move too fast, especially in boxing. How did you train your eye to be able to see if a certain jab lands, or if someone is able to get off a clean shot? Also, if you could touch on the way that you yourself break down fights after watching them to write articles, that would be much appreciated. Thanks for your time and keep up the great work. Jack. Hey Jack, really been enjoying the podcast. I've been a casual fan for a while, and I've been trying to appreciate the technical skills more. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how to quote-unquote see more? I am getting much more proficient in watching hand position and choice of strikes, but I know I'm missing a lot of details in regards to footwork and distance. Appreciate the work and look forward to hearing the historic episode. Thanks, Mark. So 2 questions basically on the same idea there. I got a few like that this week and I just wanted to share a couple of them. Breaking down fights is it's just a learned skill, really. I mean, obviously it helps to do a lot of training, but with regard to watching fights, a couple of tricks you can do. I always watch the fights in a small window on my computer, if possible, because I find it easier to watch the feet and everything move together. The feet are the most important bit in fighting, and thankfully the people who film the fights most of the time know that, and they show you the whole bodies of the fighters. For a while, the UFC had like a phantom camera, high quality thing that they used on the ground, and they'd zoom in on just like the upper half of the fighters, and they'd be in half guard, and you'd know something interesting was going on with the legs, and you'd be like, please just zoom out and let me see it. But they thankfully moved away from that now. We touched a bit on bad camera position the other week, didn't we? I said if your camera is behind either of the fighters, that's bad camera position. Tyrone Spong versus Remy Beryansky is a really bad example of that, or a really good example of that being bad. Spong was cutting the ring on Remy, and the camera was on Spong's back the entire time. So Spong was putting in these beautiful combinations, and all you could see were his lats, basically. But generally, I like to try and shrink down the video so that I'm only looking at a small window. And I mean, that leaves me free to write notes on the other side of the screen in Word or whatever, but mainly it's just so that I can see the whole thing happening at once. Because if you start with a full screen and you start looking for feet or hands or whatever, you do get caught in that one section of it. As you were saying, you're good at looking at their hands, but you're missing other bits. And that can be just because you've got too much to look at or too big an area to scan over. General rules for sort of what to be looking at with an eye for weakness or opportunity. I mean, I don't like using the term weakness. I prefer habit or opportunity, because even doing the right things the same way often enough is something that can be exploited. It's not necessarily mistakes being made. So you look for what each fighter is doing a lot, and if you have a base of reference to tell you what is out of the ordinary for each fighter, then you can tell what they've been working on, or alternatively, what they are being forced into doing. If they're not doing something they're normally doing, it's normally because the other fighter is taking something away, or they have decided that something the other fighter is doing makes doing their normal thing dangerous. A great example of that is the fighters like Giorgio Petrosian and Prince Nazim are fighters who can turn a 50 striker round fighter into a 10 striker round fighter, because they're unusual. They have a way of making people second guess themselves. And one did it through amazingly hard counter punches, and the other one did it through literally shutting down bits of their game with his hands and his checks and teeps and things. So in terms of openings in the guard, I like to go base and face. So you check how their feet are, if they're too wide, if they're too narrow, if they're going to be susceptible to inside kicks or outside kicks, if they'll be susceptible to kicks to the front of the leg, such as the chassé basse or the low line side kicks. And then you look at whether their stance is square or bladed. Bladed stances mean the front hand is closer, so the jab is more of a dangerous weapon. It also means that the opponent is behind their lead shoulder, whereas and that they're loading up their rear hand. The square stance tends to mean that they're more of a mark for punches straight up the middle, so jabs and straights. But it also means that they're looking for the left hook normally, which is a killer if they can land it while you're trying to jab or throw the straight at them. Everyone gravitates to one or the other normally, so you look at what they've got and you go based on that. And you can extrapolate face and base to every area of the striking game. Obviously, any fighter who's been fighting for a good length of time is not going to have very many openings in their guard and their base when they're on guard, when they're in their fighting position. The important parts of fighting happen between stances, in the movements, because every time you throw a punch, you leave your guard, and you try and get back to your guard as quickly as possible. Or you create temporary guards midway by getting behind your shoulders and so on. So within movement is where the important things happen. And that is why where the fight happens is very important at the highest levels. If you are along the fence, you need to move, otherwise you're going to get pushed into the fence. And that is when guys get caught circling out, as Uriah Hall did this week. But it's also an area where a lot of fighters get lost. So if you see Dominic Cruz, when he's along the fence, very rarely in trouble because guys focus entirely on his head, and he just moves it around, fakes one way, circles out. I mean, we're getting into basically every major element of the striking game is going to be important to examining a stand-up fight. But most important is to look for habits, things that guys do a lot, and then ask, how could that go wrong? And if the way that could go wrong matches up well with the guy he's fighting, or what you know about the guy he's fighting, then that's when you start to look at, maybe this guy's going to lose, or whatever. The things to really look for are just things that go unanswered. It's a tricky game, but like throughout the stand-up, base and face, check where the guard is, watch their footwork. I mean, obviously, you can spot all the shit ones, like crossing the feet, which very rarely makes it into the UFC anymore. No one's crossing their feet at a high level. But things like backing up straight towards the fence and only breaking offline once they realise they're about to hit the fence. Very good fighters. I mean, it should be the ideal for everyone, but obviously we're talking about very good fighters do this. When they realise they're getting far enough from the centre of the octagon, they cut offline. They get on they take an angle and they move off. If you move straight back towards the fence and you only start circling out once you hit the fence or you feel it on your back foot, it's too late. Junior Dos Santos, Stefan Struve, Martin Kampmann, there's hundreds of examples of that. Examples of people doing the opposite and doing it extremely well. Holly Holm takes a step back and then immediately takes a step offline. She never goes back 2 steps in a row. But that's being a boxer, because you've got the ropes there and that's an ever-present threat. It's not a big circle around you, it's a square, and you've got corners and stuff you can get trapped in. In terms of the ground game, it's best to have prior knowledge on each of the guys, but check for what controls they're going for from guard, if they're able to tie up their hands, if they're not really concerned about tying up their hands, or they're looking for like wrist control. Wrist control really very rarely works in the guard in mixed martial arts anymore, and even back in the day it was guys like Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira who had phenomenal forearm strength, grip strength, and were able to put in their knees and get behind knee shields and deflect the punches when they needed to. Most important is to notice what successful techniques are opening up later on. If you see, like, I think it was Bisping versus Belfort, I put a tweet out saying, oops, someone's getting it kicked in the head, because both of them were throwing their rear hand straight and both of them were dipping their head offline to get past it, slipping towards that side and reaching to parry it. And I figured, okay, well, we're seeing the old double attack here. Someone's going to get kicked in the head. And ultimately it was Bisping. But trying to evade that left straight for Bisping, right straight for Belfort was making both men far more susceptible to a high kick because they would bring their head down towards it. So the fight game generally is doors being opened by other things, just irritating people until something else opens up. Bit of a rambling answer. I mean, I did have a series called Ringcraft going on Fightland. We're waiting until Ronda Rousey comes back for that, I believe, because I put out, I put together a 15-minute brilliant piece of work on the fall of Rousey, but then she decided to retire, basically. So, that's in limbo. Alternatively, I wrote an ebook on Kindle, which you can get on Amazon, called Finding the Art, which is entirely devoted to what I think are personally think are the most important principles of the stand-up game, at least. So we're talking about where the fight happens, how to generate punching power, or hitting power generally, transfers of weight and things like that, dirty tactics, outfighting, infighting, tie-ups, all that sort of stuff. Now, I hope that helps, and the best thing you can do for it is to practice. Just keep watching fights. Keep saying what's working, what's not working. If it's not working, why does he keep doing it? If it is working, why is he not doing it enough? Hi, Jack. Do you think we would ever see Uechi-style toe kicks and knuckle punches in MMA, or do they fall into the Bushido realm of techniques? From Joseph. This is a really interesting one, actually. If you don't know anything about Uechi-ryu or Weichi-ryu, it's a style of karate which came to Okinawa from China. I think it was tiger boxing originally or something like that. Pangai Noon. A guy called Kanbun Uechi went from Okinawa to China and learnt this style. And it's a really hard body style. So Sanchin, which is the isometric kata, if you haven't seen it, go search it online. It's basically you're walking up and down in this stance and everything is tense. You're just tensing your whole body, and you're going through the motions of thrusting your hands out and turning and then doing the Todoguchi or Mwashiyuki circly blocks at the end, the ones that Kikuno does at the start of his fights. But there's all sorts of stories about Kanbun Uechi. Sounds like a really interesting chap. One of them is the whole Uechi style is based around fingertip thrusts, what are called nukite. Nukite, I believe nuki is a spear in Japanese. Single knuckle fists, ippon ken, which is one knuckle poking out, and sumasaki, or the toe tips. In fact, I think it's just the tip of the big toe. And there's two ways to do it, because traditionally all kicks in the early forms of karate, back when it was just te or ti, were done with the tips of the toes, and they were all aimed at the groin. But Uechi really focuses on curling that toe up like a claw almost. If you see any of the stuff from Shigeru Igami, who was one of the first students of Gichin Funakoshi, the founder of Shotokan, when he came to Tokyo, he goes on and on about how they used to kick with the not even the toe tips, the first knuckle of the big toe. And they used to practice walking on that and then jumping on that, like a ballerina on point. It does gnarly things to your feet. I mean, even being a ballerina messes up your body a fair amount, but doing that to your toes is not good for you. It's a very hardcore style. A lot of these things, it's easy to hide behind the bullshit of it taking a lifetime to perfect, but it takes a long time to get comfortable hitting things with your fingertips and toe tips. But Genki Sudo, after he retired, went down to Okinawa and wrote a book about training with karate guys down there. And he asked little old Uechi Ryu guy about the toe kick, and apparently he said, "Can I have a feel?" And he still had his abs because he's Genki Sudo and he's still in his shape. And he's been kicked by guys like Albert Kraus, and he's happy to be hit in the gut. And the guy hit him 30% force or something like that and put him to his knees. So, I mean, that's anecdotal, but if you think about it, it is a tiny point that the force of the kick is going through, and you can really dig it in. I mean, that's why kicks with the ball of the foot work so well, because you can just dig them in with such pressure on that one point. But it takes a ton of conditioning, and you've got to be happy to mess up your body. I know a lot of guys from the traditional karate world who love the Makiwara training and stuff like that, but they have to put a real cap on it, because otherwise you can't play guitar anymore, or things like that, If you wanted to make yourself into a weapon, I suppose that sort of stuff, Uechi Ryu would be the way to go. Because it's very specialised too. They only had 3 forms, and they made up some others for like demonstrations and so on. But they only had 3 forms, and Kanbun Uechi spent his entire decade or whatever in China learning that. He came back, he started teaching, and then one of his students killed someone, so he stopped teaching for a while. And then he finally resumed teaching, and he taught his son Kane Uechi. And there's a few good students of him. But if you look at the 70-year-old Uechi Ryu guys, I mean, no matter what you think about martial arts and Bushido and not sparring enough and things like that, you can look at these guys and they are bad dudes. I'll try and find that clip of Sanseru or Sandarui, or whatever the name of their big kata is, done by Seiko Toyama, who was like 90 years old when he's doing this kata, and he's just bulging with muscles for a 90-year-old. They take body conditioning very, very seriously. I would love to see some toe kicks in MMA, because I've been arguing for years for kicks with the ball of the foot, and then they finally started coming in and winding everyone. Imagine if someone could toe kick. It's just that you can't really get someone to, there's not an awful lot of 20-year-olds who've spent 20 years practicing their toe kicks. And that's what the UFC is largely made up of, and it's a real commitment too. That's time you've got to take away from other things. Plus, it's just not good for you, not healthy. Knuckle punches, Nakadaka Ken and Ippon Ken, they're really more sort of self-defense, hurty techniques. The aforementioned Shigeru Igami spent years trying to work out the best punch. The dude was absolutely obsessed with karate, and it made him quite ill. But he went around trying to find the hardest punch, visiting all the martial arts schools and stuff. He said the boxers had the hardest punch. He'd take all the punches on the abdomen, and he estimated he took about 10,000 people's different punches. And he ended up having really bad intestinal issues later in life and died. So don't do that. It's stupid. But he came to the conclusion that punching with the fist wasn't enough. He really liked punching with the middle knuckle poking out, the Nakadaka Ken. And he said that if you punch someone in the body like that, they instantly feel it. And there's all sorts of stories about him getting to the point where he could, like, make holes in cushions that people were holding and stuff like that. I'm not sure if I believe him. But, I mean, you can try this yourself. I mean, a lot of you train, a lot of you are in fairly good shape. Have a go with the Nakadaka Ken. Have someone stab you with it and stab them with it. Gloves get in the way a bit, and also it's a very weak joint. I mean, as much as you can make a fairly sturdy sort of pokey thing with it, but if you start punching as hard as you can, there's a good chance you're going to sprain a finger. There was a guy on Mind, Body and Kick-Ass Moves, which was this really fun documentary on the BBC about martial arts. I'm hoping they'll let me do one in like 10 years' time or something. I don't know. When they finally notice me. But this guy in Filipino Kali school or Eskrima school, it was these like 8 old dudes trained with machetes every day, and he said that he loved the middle knuckle fist, and the presenter asked him how he trained it, and the guy laced his fingers like the old Vanderlei Silva wrist roll in the corner thing. He laced his fingers, put them down on the floor, and started doing press-ups on them, on like gravel. It looked agonizing. Yeah, I mean, the thing with all of these things is that if someone comes along who's worked it enough that it actually works for them and they can fight, then we'll all be impressed by it. Like the side kick and the front snap kick and everything else that's come, the hook kick. But with all these things, it's normally best to say bullshido until proven innocent. But thanks for a nice karate question. Love those ones. Lets me get a little bit of history in. Hello, Jack. Thanks for your amazing work. I want to know who are your favourite martial arts analysts and the upcoming fights you're looking forward to. From SBR. Always got to be tactical when you say this stuff, because there are so many guys that I would love to give shout-outs to, but if I start doing them all, I'll forget some and I'll look like a dick. But I mean, all the guys the UFC's brought on are doing great work. Brian Stan, Kenny Florian, Dominic Cruz, even Daniel Cormier, guys in the studio doing amazing work. And then I love the work of Patrick Wyman and Connor Rebush. Their Heavy Hands podcast is amazing. I have trouble keeping up with where they both are because they've both been to Sherdog, and I think they left Sherdog or so. I'll look into that. Lawrence Kenshin, obviously a good friend of mine. BJJ Scout, also a friend. Go and help BJJ Scout out. He's having some trouble with his YouTube channel at the moment, and he doesn't deserve it. The guy is a national treasure from whichever nation he's from. I'm going to make him an English national treasure. I declare it. Robin Black obviously does great work. Dan Hardy obviously does amazing work and is just a stand-up guy to boot. And great at his job. John Gooden's good too, actually. He's doing a great job with Hardy. I mean, the thing that is that sort of prevents me from giving you a good answer to this is that I try, when I'm writing about something, I try and stay away from other people's work on it because, I'm going to sound like the Gracie brothers here, but you have your own filter when you look at stuff, and I want to give people what I see when I look at it, and I worry that if I listen to too much stuff beforehand, I'm just going to repeat someone else's opinion worse. I'm going to take their stuff and not be able to see what I would normally see, and not do justice to what they would say about what they saw. So I don't really get to watch a lot of stuff. I like a week when if I've skived on doing a piece of writing about something, about an upcoming fight, I'll go and listen to the Heavy Hands on that, and I really enjoy that, just my downtime. Because, I mean, this is what I used to read and enjoy before I got into this stuff, into writing this stuff at least, with the technical studies and things like that. And writing them all the time doesn't give you much chance to sort of go back and enjoy them yourself. I mean, I personally don't like seeing myself as an analyst. I like just being a writer with an opinion. Analyst puts you in a sort of a box, and really what all these people are and what I am are just people with opinions. And when you've been following the fight game for a while, you try and accumulate opinions that you respect. And they're not always going to be right, you're not always going to agree with them, but you try and get the group of people that you like to listen to, and you try and get people with maybe differing views, and it can be quite hard, especially in boxing. Because boxing is one that's just full of people shouting each other down. In mixed martial arts, the guys with opinions tend to be a lot better and nicer to each other, so you can actually weigh them up without being like, oh, he knows nothing. I would advise you to listen to all of them. There used to be like things when someone's article would go up on Reddit, I'd get, ooh, so-and-so's better, and then I'd go on so-and-so's article, and it would say, oh, he's just pretending to be Jack Slack. And no, we're just people with opinions. There's never been any well, I've never felt like I'm in competition with anyone, because these are people whose views I respect and appreciate anyway. And I'd be seeking them out if I weren't one of the people writing. You are spoiled for choice on analysts. In terms of fights I'm looking forward to, when you're writing about them, it's just a constant barrage of events, so you can't really keep up with it. It's like the weekend before the fights, I'll look up what's going on, and then I'll go, oh, this is what I can write this week. Oh, Jesus, is that happening? But a couple in my head that I just remember I'm looking forward to. Rafael dos Anjos versus Tony Ferguson, obviously. That sounds amazing. You got the Wild Man versus the Systematic Pressure Fighter. And then Dariush versus Magomedov underneath that on that card. Jorge Masvidal is going to be back in action. That guy can't catch a break, but I love him. Love watching him fight. Just defensively so tight. Woodley versus Thompson, obviously. Can't wait to see that one. Gastelum versus Cerrone is actually one I'm really looking forward to, because Gastelum is... he's just come on leaps and bounds since The Ultimate Fighter. His hands are looking so crisp, and he's a smart lad who really applies the pressure well. And if there's one thing Donald Cerrone didn't like, it's pressure. But equally, the counter knees, they're the enemy of the aggressor. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And then, of course, you got World Series of Fighting doing Gaethje versus Dugulubgov, which doesn't look like a very smart matchup. Let's have a look at Dugulubgov's record. 8-2 on a 3-fight win streak. I mean, who are they going to put Gaethje up against? But Gaethje, anytime Gaethje fights, watch Justin Gaethje. Can't repeat that enough. Most exciting fighter in the sport. And probably one of the most dangerous fighters in the sport. And he is one of those ones where you can see that he's going to be worn down quite rapidly by his career, because he takes a lot of shots, wilts guys under pressure. He just melts them. But unfortunately, he takes a lot of shots to do that. So it's one of those ones where he's a swarmer, but you'd want to see him get in with the best very, very quickly, because I think on a good night, he could give anyone in the world a real hard time. But the later it gets in his career, the more he's going to have trouble doing that. If his chin starts giving out, if he can't take the shots anymore, if he starts to slow down. But the man is just a buzzsaw through a lumber mill over there at World Series of Fighting. Right, we're getting near the end of time this week. I don't think there's an awful lot you need me to go over about Cyborg Justino's fight this weekend. 6-1 opponent, obviously very good kickboxer, but 6-1 in MMA is not a lot of experience for someone who's going to come in and try and ragdoll you. I'm not a fan of the way that the UFC is marketing Cyborg at the moment. Everyone's scared to fight her, so we're putting her against substandard opposition so that she can win easily. And then afterwards everyone says, Cyborg is the greatest women's fighter who ever lived, or whatever, which is truly strange. If you're not familiar with the women's 145 division, it's even weaker than the women's 135 division. In fact, it's really, really weak. It's go on Fight Matrix, and just check how the people stack up. You got Cyborg, and then you got Marlos Conan, and then you got no one. And Cyborg beat Marlos Conan twice, and those are her biggest wins. They're very important. But to be honest, I'm just not blown away by the whole Cyborg Justino thing. She's been sharpening up her striking, and I really respect that. She's a very good fighter, clearly, technically, nowadays, whereas she was just sort of a wild woman before. But, get to 135 and fight some people we know. Or continue fighting at 145, but don't do it in the UFC, because there is no one to fight at 145, and it's just... If they made a belt for that weight class, it would be desperate. Everyone in the division would be ranked in the top 15, basically. And then you'd have some empty spots. So there's that this weekend, and not a lot else. The return of Renan Barão, which is always a good sign. Always a good thing, rather. He's had a bit of a fall from grace, Barão. But I really liked what he was showing in the Jeremy Stephens fight. Both the guys in that looked well prepared for their specific opponent. And Barão was using a lot more lateral movement than usual, and he wasn't opening himself up to swing as much. He was doing a lot more sharpshooting, which is a game that suits him, to be honest. He's another one, when he starts throwing the right hand, he squares up and opens himself up to counters, which is how TJ Dillashaw got him in both their fights. Right, I reckon that'll do us for this week. Remember to support us on Patreon. History episode coming this week. I'm fairly confident that I will be able to finish it this week, which is great. Make sure to check out Fightland for all my articles this week. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you actually get these podcasts come up in your feed. And remember to shoot your mail to fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. I'll see you next week. Cheers.